She sold out a stadium in 30 minutes, then watched it empty in 73. 10,000 people went silent at the exact same second. Not because a whistle blew, not because anyone told them to, because the one person they had all traveled for was walking off a tennis court, and somewhere in that walk, the entire building lost its pulse. A 21-year-old ranked outside the world's top 20 had just outdrawn 9-time Grand Slam champions. She had sold out a session in half an hour. She had forced a Wednesday night food menu to change for the first time in the tournament's history. And then, in 73 minutes, it was gone. What actually happened in Toronto this August is stranger, bigger, and more revealing than any single tennis score. Stick around, because by the end of this you'll understand why tournament directors across the sport are quietly panicking about a problem they've never had to solve before. What happens when your biggest draw isn't your best player? Before we get into it, if you're into stories where sports collide with something bigger, identity, community, the business of fame, hit subscribe now because this channel is about to get a lot more interesting. 3 nights before that silence, Toronto didn't look like Toronto. It looked like a piece of Manila had been airlifted in and dropped inside Sobeys Stadium. Philippine flags lined the railings. Families who had never watched a professional tennis match in their lives waited in line for hours. Vendors scrambled to add Filipino dishes to their menus mid-tournament, something Tennis Canada had never done before in the event's history. And center court, a stage usually reserved for the sport's biggest legends, was handed over to a player ranked outside the top 20, because the tournament simply had nowhere else to put her. Her name is Alex Eala. She's 21, from the Philippines, and a week earlier she had done something no Filipino tennis player had ever done. She won a WTA Tour singles title, beating American Jessica Pegula in the final of the Mubadala City DC Open in Washington. That result alone would have made her a story. What happened next made her a phenomenon. The moment her opening match in Toronto, against American Alicia Parks, was confirmed, phones started ringing and did not stop. According to tournament director Carl Hale, roughly 3,100 tickets moved almost immediately, and the session sold out in about 30 minutes. Hale would later say, almost bewildered by his own words, that the tournament had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this kind of pull. To put that 30-minute sellout in context, reports at the time noted that the only comparable Wednesday night sellout in the tournament's last 20 years belonged to Serena Williams. Let that sink in for a second. Not a rising star having a good week. Something closer to gravity. And gravity, it turns out, has a cruel habit of disappearing without warning. But we'll get to that. First, let's understand why this was happening at all, because the why is where this stops being a stats story and becomes something a lot more human. The Greater Toronto Area is home to roughly 270,000 Filipino Canadians, the largest Filipino community anywhere in Canada. For years, professional tennis has tried, often clumsily, to widen its audience beyond its traditional base. Then a 21-year-old from Manila showed up fresh off a career-defining title, and in a single week she did something marketing departments hadn't managed in a decade. Grandparents who had never set foot inside a tennis stadium bought tickets. Families arrived head to toe in Philippine colors. When Eala beat Parks in her opening match, becoming the first Filipino player ever to win a National Bank Open main draw match, she turned to the sold-out crowd of just over 10,000 and thanked them in Tagalog, asking for even more noise. She got it. This wasn't background enthusiasm. This was a community seeing itself reflected on a stage it had never really been invited onto before, and it wasn't planning on being quiet about it. And Eala kept giving them reasons to stay loud. She followed the Parks win with a grueling 3-set battle against American Katie McNally that stretched deep into the night, the kind of match that turns casual fans into believers. By the time she walked into the tournament's second week, she had reeled off 7 straight wins, a streak that had carried her from her Washington title all the way through Toronto and pushed her to a new career-high ranking of world number 20. Meanwhile, the tournament around her was stacked. Most of the WTA's top 10 was in the draw that year, including the world number 1, so this wasn't a case of a star shining in a weak field. She was outdrawing genuine, established superstars. Here's a number worth sitting with. Ontario's government projected the 2026 National Bank Open would bring in more than 200,000 attendees and contribute close to $60 million to the provincial economy. That was the baseline before anyone knew what Eala would do to it. A healthy, well-oiled event got handed an entirely new gear. And it didn't come from ticket discounts or a marketing push. It came from one player. Somewhere in a boardroom, you can bet someone was starting to sweat. Because here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to say out loud on camera. What happens when the business model of your tournament starts leaning on a single 21-year-old who wasn't even supposed to be the headline act? We're about to find out exactly what that looks like. Because 3 nights of flags, chants, and sold-out sessions were about to run into someone who, on paper, looked like the perfect plot twist. Her name is Belinda Bencic, 30-something Swiss veteran, former world number 4, a 2015 champion in Toronto, and the 12th seed heading into her 4th-round match against Eala. In the build-up, reporters leaned hard into a storyline. Bencic had a documented history of getting frustrated by noisy crowds. Most notably an incident earlier in the year where she snapped at a rival's player box during a match and complained to the chair umpire about the noise. The setup practically wrote itself. A player who thrives on silence, about to walk into the loudest, most emotionally charged crowd of her career. So when the tournament needed somebody to end the party, the collision looked almost too perfectly written. Calm against chaos, quiet against roar. Except real life doesn't always follow the script. And what actually happened next flips the entire narrative on its head. Keep watching because the twist here isn't the one anyone predicted. Sunday night. Same stadium, same 3 days of built-up energy thick enough to feel on your skin. Bencic, calm and clinical, methodically took the match apart. 6-4, 6-love, a bagel in the second set, the kind of scoreline that doesn't just end a match, it ends a mood. The whole thing was over in 73 minutes. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, because Bencic isn't the villain of this story. She's not even trying to be. Afterward, she didn't gloat. She acknowledged, gracefully, that she knew most of the crowd had been rooting for her opponent, and thanked them for the atmosphere anyway. It was a generous thing to say, and it confirmed what everyone in that building already suspected. They weren't there for tennis in the abstract. They were there for her, for Alex, and now Alex was gone. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The one that undercuts the whole silence versus chaos storyline reporters had been building for days. After the match, Bencic was asked directly how she handled the noise. And instead of confirming the narrative, she dismantled it. She said she'd actually never minded that kind of atmosphere, that she'd experienced it before playing Serena Williams and in Fed Cup matches against France and Brazil, and that she genuinely preferred a loud, invested crowd over a quiet, disinterested one. The player everyone had cast as the enemy of noise walked out saying she embraced it. The tension the whole match had been built around, in hindsight, was mostly a story other people told about her, not one she told about herself. Which makes what happened to that stadium afterward even stranger, because if the villain wasn't actually bothered by the crowd, the silence that followed wasn't about her at all. It was entirely about what the crowd had lost. The stadium didn't empty out slowly. It emptied out like air leaving a balloon. Flags that had been draped over railings for 3 straight nights came down, folded, packed into bags. The line at the Filipino food stall, a line that had wrapped around the corner every single night, simply wasn't there anymore. People who had covered this tournament for years said they'd genuinely never seen anything like it. A crowd noise loud enough to rival a Grand Slam final, replaced within minutes by the sound of footsteps on empty concrete. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle anyone who runs a tennis tournament for a living. Before Eala ever set foot in Toronto, this event was already a success by any normal measure. Strong attendance, a stacked field, tens of millions in projected economic impact. On paper, a healthy, thriving machine. And then one 21-year-old walked in, and the machine didn't just run better. It transformed into something else entirely, on pace to blow past the tournament's own attendance records. Not because the top-ranked players suddenly became more exciting. Not because tickets got cheaper. Because of her. That's not a fun fact. That's a warning sign. Because stars like this, the ones who don't just win matches but move entire communities, don't come around often. And when they lose early, the business built around them loses right alongside them. That's not a hypothetical anymore. That's exactly what happened in Toronto in real time, in front of 10,000 people who felt it happen live. So where does that leave Eala herself, in the middle of all this noise about numbers and ticket sales and fragile business models? Because somewhere in all of it, there's still a 21-year-old who just lost a tennis match. And what she said afterward is the part that actually stops you in your tracks. She barely talked about the loss. Instead, she talked about her community, describing herself as just a small piece of something much bigger, something that belongs to Filipinos and the pride they carry for where they come from. She talked about discovering, over one extraordinary fortnight, just how far that support could travel, from a title run in Washington to sold-out nights in Toronto, and how tennis had somehow become the unlikely stage for a diaspora to celebrate itself. There was no bitterness in it, no excuses, just quiet astonishment that a 21-year-old from Manila had turned a stadium in another country into something that felt, for 3 nights, like home. And that, more than any ticket sales figure or attendance record, is the actual story here. Because now the sport is facing a decision it didn't see coming a month ago. Does it lean into this? Does it start adjusting schedules and court assignments around the reality that a player ranked outside the top 20 can outdraw athletes ranked far above her? Does it recognize that the next great growth market for tennis might not come from a brand new tournament in a brand new country, but from communities that were always there, just waiting for someone to finally represent them on a big enough stage? Or does it treat this like a one-week anomaly, a nice story for the highlight reel, and quietly go back to business as usual the moment the flags come down and the stadium empties out? Think back to where we started. 10,000 people silent at the exact same second. Now you know why. Not because the tennis stopped being competitive, not because the tournament failed, but because for 3 unforgettable nights, one player turned a professional sports event into something closer to a homecoming. And when she walked off that court, she didn't just take a match with her. She took the heartbeat of the entire building with her too. The flags are folded now. The food stall line is gone. The stadium will fill up again for other matches, other nights, other names. But everyone who was there knows it won't feel quite the same for a while. Maybe not until she's back on that court again. Because now they know exactly what it feels like when it's real, and nothing less is going to satisfy them again. And that, right there, is the story tennis wasn't fully ready to tell about itself. The one this tournament just accidentally exposed to the entire world. If the story pulled you in, subscribe for more where sport, culture, and the human stories behind the scoreboard collide. Because this is only the beginning of the Alex Eala story, not the end of it.